This podcast is powered by the pros at Paschal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPaschal.com.
Talk to our friend Blake Lovell, Southeastern 14, as he joins us now via the McClarty Daniel hotline. Blake, a lot of fans disappointed with Arkansas athletics right now, and particularly Arkansas basketball. Your opinion, what went wrong for this team this year?
I mean, it's hard to know fully what happened, I guess, as we've talked about this year, Ty. I mean, it's one of those things where I think in the era that we're in, you're just going to get years like this, and, you know, we just aren't used to seeing it from us. I mean, he was kind of the one that was batting the highest percentage when it came to, you know, hitting on transfers and all that kind of stuff. And, I mean, again, the talent I thought was there. They just did not have the chemistry. There were just things that did not come together on the floor the way that we thought it would. And I just think, you know, this is one of those teams that, you know, ultimately we're probably going to look back on and say, how did that happen? Because I don't think this is the norm there. Obviously, it hasn't been. So, yeah, I mean, there are probably lots of different reasons, whether, you know, on the floor you can say, well, they weren't a great defensive team. They didn't do this well. They didn't do that well. The shooting didn't improve, all that. But I just think sometimes it comes down to if a coach is playing, you know, 15 million rotations throughout the year, he's clearly not found a mix that works, and that just seemed to be the problem all year. So,
when you look at what's going to happen these next few weeks with the transfer portal, do you believe that Eric Musselman is going to respond, assuming he's the Arkansas head basketball coach, and put together a team like he had the previous 3 years?
Well, I think at least if you want to look at the positive of the situation, I think it's that this certainly teaches you something because, again, he had just not really been in this spot before, and he had just kind of been used to, all right, well, it's going to work. We're going to use the exact same formula every single year, and obviously each team is different, but we kind of know, you know, how we need to do this. This is step one, this is step two, and so forth. But I mean, that process probably changes a little bit now because there may be certain things that he saw with his team that all of a sudden, you know, you go back to the drawing board and say, all right, that's not something we can bring in because clearly that did not work, you know, whatever kind of skill or whatever it is, right? And I think that will at least give him something to where, you know, call it the revenge story, whatever you want to call it. I think he will certainly be way more, you know, critical of certain things as he's going out and trying to find the guys who fit into what they want to do next season. So that is the one thing I would say is I think you can at least use this as a learning experience. And again, if you're just looking at the law of averages, they have to come back in the direction of what we've seen from us all these years before this one.
Talking with, again, Blake Lovell, Southeastern 14, covers the SEC and other college basketball. So Arkansas is not an NCAA tournament team. We just saw the SEC tournament. I don't think anyone expected it to play out like it did with upsets. Kentucky, Tennessee going down early. What SEC team do you trust starting on Thursday?
Boy, that's it's interesting because, you know, as many good seeds that the SEC has, I mean, as we always say, this thing's about matchups. And I can't say that I just completely love any SEC team draw, but I think that looking at the way that the bracket unfolds for each of these teams, I don't hate Kentucky's draw. Now the problem is, you asked me if I trust Kentucky. Well, you know, I mean, it's still a team that is as talented as anybody, but there have been times, and they've given us reasons not to trust them, whether it's just, you know, the defense slipping up at times like that or anything. But I think they may have the best path of anybody. You know, everybody's going to circle the Tennessee-St. Peter's matchup, and if you're asking me again, who do I trust? Unfortunately, as we both saw, Tennessee gave you a reason not to trust them in the SEC tournament. It kind of became sort of the thing that has stood out with them over the past several years, like it came right back with the, you know, just complete lackluster offense and all of that. So I would say Auburn, Ty, if they weren't in the, you know, the bracket of death over there with UConn and Iowa State and Illinois and all those teams. But I will say this too, you know, if there's a team that matches up well with UConn, I think Auburn's probably the team in the SEC that does it the best. And so, again, it's not fully trusting them, but it's hard to say that there's a team that I just completely trust just because, again, it's all about the matchups. But if I want to turn it towards maybe who has the best path to the Final Four, I would probably say that the Kentucky would fit the bill there.
Kentucky, I saw a stat. They're like 343rd out of 363 teams in defense. I believe that's correct. You mentioned Auburn. Auburn got a 4 after being tied for second in the SEC regular season and then also winning the conference tournament, which their fans were furious, also including being paired with UConn and Iowa State. To me, Auburn might have gotten the shortest end of the stick of any SEC team based on their draw. Do you agree?
Yep, I think that's absolutely the case. I just think that, again, what happened here, and this is something that I think, we've heard coaches talk about it over the past little while, but I think you're really going to see this start to change potentially moving forward based on what happened this year, because this isn't just a one-year thing. It's now a trend. Conference tournament didn't mean anything for anybody. And, I think other than the bubble teams, it meant nothing for the higher seeds because otherwise, again, there's no reason to kind of look at this and say, why is Auburn put in the toughest part of the bracket? And so, it didn't mean anything. And I think that's got to be frustrating because, as I pointed out to people yesterday, it's like, you think about it, if we say that phrase, the tournament didn't mean anything, well, how do you think Todd Golden feels right now? That he had his team on a great run all the way to the SEC championship with a chance to, some people thought maybe move up to as far as a 5 seed. And then he loses his starting center 3 minutes into the championship game. That ultimately didn't mean a thing. And so, that's the kind of thing that coaches are going to have to think about now. And I think that's going to be frustrating for them because, unless they figure something out, I think it's clearer than ever in the SEC the past 3 or 4 years at least, tournament's not meant anything, at least for teams that are already set in their, kind of seed range or whatever. If you're a non-bubble team, it's not doing anything for you. So, I think Auburn definitely got the short end of the stick there.
Blake Lovell, Southeastern 14 with us here on the McCarty Daniel Hotline. Do we need to do away with net and reevaluate the metrics that we use to qualify teams for the NCAA tournament?
It's not a terrible idea because I think whatever we're using right now, there's just, again, as you know, there's so many ways you can look at the data and exploit the data to push it this way or that way. But, the net is probably more about just kind of arranging teams in a certain group to kind of at least compare and all that. But I'm not saying I have the perfect formula, but I still think there are ways that we can continue to get better at this from the NCAA tournament selection process standpoint. And again, we also know that the tournament's going to expand sooner rather than later. I just think there's no doubt about that now. And again, you're going to have to continue to evolve kind of the metrics that you use and all that to judge exactly how you're going to put teams in there. Because if not, we know what's going to happen. If you do expand the tournament, well, here's what the most likely situation is going to be. You're just going to keep loading up on power conference teams that go 7-11 in their conference versus, the second best team in whatever conference you want to put out there, the SoCon or whatever, right? So that's going to be the challenge. And so I think whatever metrics they use, whether it's the net and other things, they're going to have to continue to evolve kind of how they look at those things to judge who should be in the tournament and how they're going to see them. So.
Blake, the number one story here in Fayetteville and across Arkansas amongst fans is what is the status of Eric Musselman? It's probably followed by our Caliph Battle and Tremont Mark coming back. Let me ask you this, because I asked Nick Coffey this yesterday, who admitted he was a fan, did radio in Louisville, thinks Louisville's the better job. What is the better job between the Arkansas Razorback and the Louisville Cardinals basketball job?
Ooh, obviously, I think I do tend to think, it's closer than people would want to admit just because of how bad, Louisville was under the previous regime here. But it's still a job where if you get the right resources available to you, and that's the thing too, right? Anytime we answer this question now, the biggest part of this answer is always going to come, well, who's given the most out when it comes to NIL and resources? Because that's really what this is all about now. We can look at history and say this team was great back in the 1980s and all this, but the fact is, if you're not getting the resources available to you and you're not able to compete with all the other schools in your conference, which we know Arkansas, I think, is, because otherwise they wouldn't be getting the kind of players that they are, it's harder to say that just going on traditional history. If you ask me right now which job would I take, I'm not just saying this because I'm on your show, but I would probably take the Arkansas job because I just think that as of right now, based on the momentum they built over the past however many years now, Eric Musselman, minus this season, I still think it's the job right now that you're probably going to maybe see coaches look at and say, all right, we feel pretty good about where things are set here. and we feel like we can just completely come in and win right away. But the thing is, Ty, right? I'm not saying that can't be the case for Louisville either, because if you get the coach that comes in there and they're saying, hey, we're going to give you everything you need, everything NIL, everything transfer-wise, like every possible resource you need to be successful, then there's no reason we could just sit here and say, all right, we're going to discount Louisville, because they can absolutely win right away with the next coach, whoever it is, if they're willing to put it in there. And you know what? They have over the years. Like, they've been willing to invest in their basketball program, and so it's a close race. So I can't say that there's a clear winner one way or the other, just because it really comes down to what is each school willing to give, out, and is Louisville willing to give more than Arkansas is? If so, that makes it a very attractive job to anybody out there.
Blake, follow up, and we'll let you go with this. Do you think Eric Musselman stays the Arkansas basketball coach?
Oh, we've talked about this, off air, and I think there was a time where I was probably, I think he's leaving, but I just haven't heard a lot of chatter about it as much as I was there for probably a couple weeks ago, and so that makes me wonder exactly what the next thing's going to be. I do still think there's a possibility he's not, but all I'll say is I haven't heard as much on my end that I was hearing pretty much daily and weekly for about a couple of weeks there. So it's going to be interesting.
BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.